Hi everyone, Vince Rath here from Optimum Retail Solutions, and today I want to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, sales floor management. You know, we talk with a lot of folks out in the industry, and one of the things that's clear is that everyone knows what a great sales floor manager looks like when they see it. We all understand what the characteristics are and the qualities are that we're looking for, but what we find is that most people have a difficult time describing the mechanics of how to get there. And because of that, we have a difficult time developing and teaching those people that are in our organization to move up and assume greater responsibility. So today what I'd like to do is outline the 4 or 5 key behaviors that we believe lead to optimum performance as a sales floor manager. So let's get started. You know, a primary role of all managers is to create a tone for the work environment. It's more important than deciding whether or not we're going to be happy or frustrated over a particular situation. It is our ability to create a disposition or a mindset with our associates about how work gets done. And really what I'm talking about is creating and defending the culture of the company or the culture of the department that you have. Because when it's done well, what this does, setting the tone, what it does is that it creates this context for people to make decisions when things are unfamiliar or the rules are unclear. But more importantly, it also helps them create discretionary effort that goes above and beyond whatever our minimum expectations are. So the question I would ask first are, what are your values? What are the company's values and what are your values as a leader? You have to know what's important to you so that you can express that to your team and so that they understand it. And once they do, now they've got some comfort and some boundaries around which to do their work. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I want to share my 4 non-negotiables. These are 4 principles that I've used over the last 25 years. And every person that I've ever worked with, whether I was their direct supervisor or now as a client, we talk about these 4 things, and the premise or the tone is, it's okay if we don't do these things. It's just fine. However, if we don't do them, we can't work together. And once we've established that understanding, now we've got a foundation that we can use to build on future conversations and future interactions. So here are my 4 non-negotiables. The first one is honesty with sensitivity. You know, as a manager, as a leader, we're always going to have conversations with people about performance and conduct. And sometimes those conversations are not going to be pleasant. They're going to be about subjects that are uncomfortable or that we may not want to have, but we have to have them. So the key as a leader is to go ahead and have those conversations, but then continue to protect and preserve the relationship by delivering those in a kind, respectful, and professional way. And that's what I mean by honesty with sensitivity. Is we're going to talk about things, and we may even talk about difficult things, but we're going to do it in a kind, respectful, and professional way. And by laying out that expectation, then the employee or the client knows that they're going to be able to talk to me about things, but by the same token, I'm going to be able to talk to them about things, and we're going to do it in a professional and a respectful way. My second non-negotiable is hustle. Listen, we just don't like lazy. We like best effort all the time in everything we do. That's my definition of hustle. And I believe it's possible to hustle in everything we do, whether it's a sales interaction, a coaching conversation, or simply taking out the trash. Have you ever seen anybody that took out the trash in a lazy fashion? Think about what that looks like, and then consider what it looks like when somebody does it with hustle. So hustle is important. We want to give our best effort all the time. And if we're hiring the right people, all we know, we're not talking about skill here. What we know is if they give their best effort, that's going to be enough. The third thing is teamwork. Now, teamwork is more than just getting along with each other. That is a component of it. But really what it is about making those around us better. It means we're going to share our personal experiences, our skill, the knowledge that we have with others so that they can be better and rise to the best that they can be. Likewise, we're going to celebrate their victories and we're going to console their defeats, and we're going to be the kind of teammate that they can rely upon. You know, it's that I've got your back, you've got mine kind of thing. The 4th non-negotiable is make your numbers. We're a sales organization. Our industry is built on driving top-line sales and generating gross profit, and so make your numbers is an important component. And we can't continue if we don't if we don't make our numbers consistently. So we're going to talk about it in a kind, respectful way. We're going to expect people to give their best effort. We're going to expect them to make those around them better, and we're going to expect them to deliver the numbers and the expectations that we have. So now that you kind of heard my non-negotiables or my values in the context that I'm talking about, I would encourage you to think about what's important to you and how are you going to share that. Because once you've identified what's important, then you can identify whether it is or isn't happening in a day-to-day basis. It's very, very important. All right, so once we've set the tone, now we've got to define performance. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I did a video on this earlier. And so check a link at the bottom of this video for a connection over to how to get people to do what you expect, because it's really about defining performance. But in the end, we want to establish the what, how, and when of our expectations. What is always outcome, it's the target, and we always start there. So we want to produce X amount of Y in a specific time frame. How is behavior, and we want to break that down to its component parts and identify the best practices of each step of a complex behavior. For instance, I talk about greeting as one of the steps of the sales process because that's a step that we can observe, we can identify, and we can coach to. But how do you teach somebody to get better at greeting? Well, we have 5 steps within the greeting process that we talk about, and I would encourage you to think about what are the best practices that you have on the sales line. The first one is that we have to be properly positioned. Number 2 is we have to smile and have open body language. Number 3 is exchange names with the client when they come in. Number 4 is learn the recipient and occasion. And number 5 is establish common ground. Now those 5 things become the basis or the foundation of what we expect people to do, and that's where we expect them to be compliant, is that they have to do those 5 things. Technique and personality are not considered in this at this point. That becomes about skill, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what we have to do is identify the what, how, and then the when. When is a time frame, and when do we expect these expectations or these results to be produced? So once we've got that, once we've set the tone, once we've defined performance, now it's time to go out and do what we normally think of as a sales floor manager's role, and that is follow up. Now, one technique in particular that I want to talk about, I call it OTT, observe, target, take action. So what we're really doing in the first step of this is that we're observing behavior against those best practices that we just talked about, for example, with greeting. And you would have the same sort of breakdown for every part of your business. Now there's 5 areas that I really like to talk about. One is sales, one is loss prevention, one is operations, one is morale, and one is the physical plant. Is the store clean and orderly and in good repair? And once we do that, once we're looking as a sales floor manager, we're on the sales floor observing activity around those 5 areas against the outline or the common language that we've just established, and we're considering 2 things. The first lens that we think about is compliance. Is the employee doing what we expect as a minimum standard? So in the example of greeting, were they in the right position? Did they smile and have open body language? Did they exchange names with the customer? And so on. And if they did all of those things, then the next lens we want to think about is skill. Did they do those things well? And the difference between the 2 is that compliance requires performance management. In other words, do these things because I've asked you to do them. And skill requires coaching, which now becomes a discussion about different techniques to improve their execution. And that's where personality and style and our own individual style begin to come into play. Because the way I say hello to a customer, the way I greet them, is going to be different than the way another person might do it. However, we're still going to have those 5 basic principles that are inside of it. We're going to be properly positioned, smile and have open body language, and so on. So as we're observing, then, we want to target a particular activity and we want to identify the gap. And there's always a gap. It's either going to be a gap that exceeds our expectations or that doesn't meet our expectations. And once we've targeted a particular activity or a particular behavior, then it's time to intervene. And as a sales floor manager, we're primarily talking about sales interaction. What I'm really talking about is intervening at the transaction level. either during the transaction to go ahead and influence its outcome, or immediately after the interaction to provide coaching and development for the employee for the next interaction. And what we want to do is we want to out-process what just happened against the common language that we've already established up front. We want to talk about the steps of the process and the best practices within each one of those steps, and talk about, number one, did you comply and did we do those things? And number two, did we do them well? And like I said, we want to reinforce those behaviors on compliance. We use performance management if that's the case, if compliance is the issue, and then coaching and technique development if skill is the issue that we're talking about. Now, people oftentimes ask me, what happens if I have to have the same conversation over and over and over again with an employee? And what I tell them is that that's where our personal style changes as a leader. We have to escalate the nature, the tone, and tenor of the conversation. So escalate the nature of the conversation so that we use different words. We may conduct the conversation in a different location, like off the sales floor in an office. You might even, if you're in a mall environment, go out to the food court or out to the common area to have this discussion. But you want to change the environment, you want to change the words you use, and you want to change the tone in which they're delivered so that the associate understands something is different here. We're not just continuing to be motivational or encouraging, but the manager expects something different to occur. So once you've done that, once you've gone through and you've set the tone, you've defined performance, you've followed up with the OTT, and then you've intervened at the transaction level to begin to provide feedback and coaching appropriately, you just start it all over again, and it's just a cycle that happens over and over and over again. And the thing that's kind of cool about it is that once that becomes a habit in your business, then what you'll see happen is that the team will begin to evaluate themselves against those standards. The manager, the floor general will walk up and say, hey, how did things go? What did you do well? And what would you do differently? And the associate already knows the questions, and they already have practice comparing their performance against that outline. And you'll find that they begin to self-diagnose. And over time, what happens is that they begin to do that as a team, and it requires less and less personal oversight from the sales manager. So that's a quick description of how to manage a sales floor. If you found it helpful, please like and share this video with your friends, and be on the lookout for more blogs, videos, and articles from us coming out later in the year. Thank you again. I really appreciate all the support that you've given us over the last few years, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.